Arron's going to be talking to us about the natural language processing, text mining. And you've worked in Alan Turing, haven't you? So I'll let Arron introduce himself. I won't.
Yeah, sure. I can also change the slides forward as well, so that's good. I can do that. Yeah, so thanks everyone. So thanks for the invite. I'm Arron Lacey, so I'm a senior lecturer in Swansea University. I'm going to talk to you today about using natural language processing for healthcare research and to enhance population health research. So a little bit about me. Yeah, I'm a senior lecturer in cancer data science and bioinformatics, although I've done quite a bit of work in epilepsy. And as Sinead pointed out, I've worked at the Alan Turing Institute for a few years trying to detect dementia around 15 years before it presents in clinical practice. I'm currently funded by the Wales Cancer Research Centre. I got around 15 years of experience using the SAIL data bank, and I've got quite varied interests. So being in SAIL, epidemiology, but bioinformatics, machine learning, and natural language processing. Basically, I've had difficulty picking a lane in my career, so I'm interested in everything. But today I'm going to talk about natural language processing. So what is it? So let's just set the scene. So NLP is a cross-disciplinary field of computer science and linguistics. And essentially, you can use NLP to do a few different things. So as you're all aware in the ChatGPT era, you can use natural language processing algorithms to summarize text, summarize this big document for me. You can use it to extract certain bits of information. So find all the parts in this text where it says that they have a risk factor or they smoke or something like that. You can see that they're using chatbots and also for classification. So can you ingest a whole bunch of text, maybe a clinic letter, and can you determine if this person has epilepsy, yes or no? Those kinds of questions. So there's a lot. It's synonymous these days with machine learning and AI, so especially large language models. But it didn't always start out like that. And so my own journey and the group that we work with, it didn't start necessarily with ML. And I think NLP is a curious field because in the last 10 years, it's completely changed over the last 10 years. The introduction of ChatGPT has just been a paradigm shift in how people conduct natural language processing. So I'm going to talk to you about various projects that I've worked on that have used NLP and using that with the SAIL data bank, but also a little bit about NLP as a field and how we've had to evolve with things like ChatGPT and so on. Okay. Yeah, so why are we interested in it? So what got us interested in the first instance? So yeah, I work with SAIL a lot, and we publish a lot using SAIL. There's over 600 publications using the SAIL data bank now, really good publications. And that's because we collect a lot of data about patients. That goes back to about 1995, and data's been digitized in GP practice and so on. And so you can do sort of lots of population health sort of trends in healthcare data. And we've done that, and I've done a lot of that in epilepsy, for example. But the data that is collected in, say, GP data, and we make use of that a lot because we identify people with epilepsy in SAIL using GP data. Data collected in GP practice is not collected for research purposes. They are collected just to take care of your patient record and ensure that the GP is informed about why you're there that day. On average, GP visits, they last around 11 minutes. So there's not scope there to collect really detailed data for research like we would like to do using the SAIL data bank. So this slide can demonstrate that. So for example, we identify people with epilepsy using read codes. And there's a particular code. If it begins with F25, it means you've got some form of epilepsy. And as you can see, I think this is from 2008 or something like that. There are around 3,481 people with a code for epilepsy that began with F25. But when you look down at the more granular types of epilepsy, so the specific epilepsy type, complex partial seizures, and so on, what we find is that GPs, on average, they tend not to put in the specific epilepsy type. They just don't have time to do this, go through drop-down lists. And it means that although we can pick up people that have epilepsy using SAIL, we can't really use the type of epilepsy. And this can be really important for studies that we're interested in. So we worked out pretty early on, and this is not just epilepsy, by the way, this is most conditions that you would look at in SAIL. You can still do a lot, but there's only so much detail available in SAIL. And so we worked this out, and we've tried to bring in richer data to do this, and NLP is a way to do that, because clinic letters like this, so if someone's gone to an epilepsy clinic, they would have been seen by a specialist, a neurologist. They would have worked with them and done some tests and so on, identified that they have epilepsy, and in this case, juvenile absence epilepsy, and they'll write a letter like this to your GP. And in this letter is a lot of rich data, which you wouldn't necessarily find in a routine audit from GP data. So things like the type of drug they're on, although we know they might have an Apelin prescription, we don't know the dose. It's really hard to get information sale. And we certainly wouldn't know things like the patient has 3 to 4 seizures per day from their GP data alone. However, it will be in things like these clinic letters. So these rich data sources, they do exist, and NLP is a good way to try and get hold of these. So, we spent probably about 8 years or so doing NLP work to bring data like this into sale. And the first step in this, so again, NLP hasn't necessarily always been AI and ML. When we first started this, we were looking at rules-based systems. So we published an algorithm, which is open source, is on GitHub, and it's called Exact. And it was a rules-based system to do NLP. And what we mean by this is we generate lots of little rules. So if we take prescriptions, for example, we want to pick up the drug name, the dose, and how often they take it. You can break this down into lots of different rules that we as humans kind of understand. So we could say she is taking a drug, which is a variable, a number, which is the dosage, unit, and frequency. And there are lots of different ways you can express this. You can mix and match the number and the drug, and so on. And if anyone's done regular expressions before and you've written these hard-coded patterns in, you could spend a lot of time coming up with dictionaries, rules, and so on. And you could extract the information from clinic letters this way. And this is exactly what we did back in the day. And we would do things like this. We would create lots of custom dictionaries. So if you're not aware of how clinicians express things, for example, B.D, did anyone know that that means you take the drug twice daily? Just that, B.D. They don't write twice daily, just B.D. So we had to write lots of these little terms. And when we see it in the text, it means something to us. So they take this twice a day. So we create lots of different dictionaries to do this kind of thing. And, we can use read codes to get epilepsy codes and things like that. But you can also use, this is UMLS, so this is the Unified Medical Language System. We can pick up terms that we would typically see in a clinic letter, so idiopathic generalized epilepsy, and it has a concept unique identifier. There are lots of different medical ontologies. Read and ICD-10 are a few, but UMLS aggregates around 600 ontologies together, so it's really comprehensive and it gets used a lot in NLP. So we build lots of these little dictionaries of terms we want to see flagged in documents. Again, we even assign things, because clinicians, they like to hedge. They wouldn't just outright say, yes, they have epilepsy. They'll say things like, they possibly have epilepsy, suspected epilepsy. And so we would even do things like get a dictionary of those terms and assign a certainty level to this. So a lot of manual work. Again, this is before machine learning really kicked off in NLP. And we would stitch these together using rules. So for example, we would have, this is like the form of regex, and we used an algorithm called GATE to do this. And I did check, and in the GitHub repository, we had around 121 different dictionaries that we'd stitched together over a few years. And there were over 1,000 different rules that we'd stitched together. So a lot of manual work that we did over a 2-year period to produce this exact algorithm. But it turned out it was pretty good. So this is sort of about 8 years ago. We could use rules-based NLP systems to do things like pick out epilepsy with reasonable precision and recall, an F1 score. We validated this against an annotated data set. So Owen Pickrell, who works with us, he went through 200 different letters and he annotated all of them and he scored our algorithm. And I think he made a mistake halfway through and had to do it all again. So a lot of repetitive work that he would have had to do. I've highlighted here, though, seizure frequency. We were really interested in this term because for doing research in SAIL and epilepsy, if you don't know how bad someone's seizures are, it's really difficult to do studies. Does this drug help someone's seizures? That's the main thing a drug is targeted to do. So we don't really have that in SAIL, and it's actually really difficult to get that from clinic letters. So using a rules-based system, we knew that we had to do something better. And by the time we'd finished with this algorithm, we were moving on to different things using ML and machine learning anyway. Still though, this, even though it's a rules-based system, and that's not the hot thing these days, it's been quite highly cited, and this algorithm and the data that we publish with it regularly gets used as a benchmark for fancier algorithms, and it holds its own. So we have lots of deep learning methods which try to extract seizure frequency and so on, and rarely they do better than what we do. So rules-based system, ancient stuff in NLP, but they still tend to work quite well if you put a lot of work in there. Anyway, so we were able to use this algorithm to link genomic data into SAIL as well. So we're really interested in understanding if there's anything like genomics or what prescription someone's on for epilepsy, if that affects their seizure frequency. And the idea is that can a patient remain seizure-free for a year so they can drive and that kind of thing. And this is a really nice study because we brought together, it's actually whole exome sequencing from an epilepsy biobank in Wales. We collected whole exome data and mutation data, and we also linked that to seizure frequency data that we'd used EXECT for, which we extracted from clinic letters. We linked those two data sources together with the SAIL data bank. And we were able, it's a very long pipeline to do this, but we were able to get a nice finding from this. So there were two genes in particular, where if you have a mutation on the CACN1AC or the KCNQ1 gene for epilepsy, yes, they do cause epilepsy, but we noticed that when you linked it to SAIL, those people tended to have less hospital admissions and they tended to remain seizure-free for a lot longer. So that was a nice example of using NLP to link together seizure frequency with genomic data and the SAIL data bank. Excuse me. Okay, still rules-based system, but we know we needed to move on from this. So we wanted to use machine learning to try and speed this process up and improve seizure frequency in particular. But the first challenge that you encounter when you want to do machine learning is that you need lots of data to train algorithms. So poor Owen, who annotated our data for us, is not really sustainable to do that all manually. So we tried to kill two birds with one stone. Can we create an algorithm using ML, machine learning, to extract seizure frequency? But can we also use the suggestions of a tool like that to a clinician, and then they can score and accept and reject that? So they can quickly annotate their own data sets and we can score our own algorithms. And we developed a system called Markup to do this. It's on the SAIL internship scheme, actually. It was really successful, partly funded by HDR UK and the EPSRC. We created Markup, and the ideas behind Markup is, could we use NLP that allows clinicians to quickly generate gold standard data, i.e. to train machine learning algorithms and score algorithms? And could we test newer machine learning techniques? So we used a long short-term memory recurrent neural network to try and identify seizure frequency in clinic letters. And we used these suggestions and we put them in front of clinicians, and they could quickly accept or reject this and annotate their data. And we used reinforcement learning to improve the neural network as we went through this. So just a very quick short demo. Clinicians get an interface like this with Markup. We use our deep learning LSTMs to predict, identify prescriptions, and you can see it's picked out all the various components of a prescription. And the clinician can then say, yes, I'm going to accept this, and they bring that into their training data. So we can use that data from then forward to train other algorithms. So it's a really nice way to kill two birds with one stone. And it was our first foray going from rules-based systems to using machine learning to do natural language processing. A nice perk of this is that there was a 14.2% decrease in annotation time for the clinician, and we didn't really sacrifice any accuracy in annotation to do this. So lots of people use Markup now, especially around Swansea Bay, in cancer, cardiovascular disease and that sort of thing. So it's a nice tool which helped us sort of break into the ML side of things. But we can't really talk about NLP without ChatGPT. So ChatGPT was a paradigm shift for NLP research. It almost really killed whole tranches of NLP research, and it made us pivot towards something else. So ChatGPT, as you might know, is based off technology called large language models. And we can use these in natural language processing research. I'm sure everyone on this call has opened up a tab with ChatGPT They've asked it various questions and they're amazed at the answers ChatGPT spits out to you. So the potential is there to use NLP to do things like extract seizure frequency. I think what most people use ChatGPT for is to do things like summarize documents. So, squish this down into a nice, concise summary that I can use. But we're interested in something very particular, and it's information extraction. So we've done quite a bit of research recently on, can you use LLMs to do information extraction? Now, because we work with patient data, which is private, we can't just send data off to ChatGPT because that goes to servers over in America. But there are open source versions of large language models that we use. And so we can download this, we can open source it, we can sandbox this off on the internet, and we can use these models. And the open source community, they've had an amazing response to ChatGPT. So there's this leaderboard. So if anyone's heard of Hugging Face before, is a Python library, which allows you to run large language models via Python mainly. And the community has developed lots of open source large language models that researchers can use and you can use behind a firewall. So a lot of our research revolves around using these types of models. The big sort of FANG companies, they've caught on with this. So for example, Meta, they've created Llama 3, which is an open source large language model. Google have created one called Gemma, and we've got others such as Mistral, Qwen, and DeepSeek. And these are really helpful for researchers. So a lot of NLP research now is, can we leverage open source large language models to do specific tasks? And they come in different sizes as well. So if you can imagine, ChatGPT on its own, while it might do a good job at detecting seizure frequency, you might want to fine tune ChatGPT, give it further instructions on how to improve that process. That's really difficult though, because ChatGPT is such a big model. There are rumored to be over 1 trillion different parameters in that model. It's really hard to influence a model that big to do a very specific task. But these smaller models, although out the box, they're not quite as capable, it's easier to influence these models. You can feed some training data in, and we spent a long time collecting training data for ML purposes. You can take a smaller model and influence those models and fine tune it to do a very specific task, i.e. detect seizure frequency. So we spent quite a bit of time doing this, and we use a typical method to do is something called Clora. What we do is we take a pre-trained model, a very small model, maybe 7 billion parameters. We'll feed in some training data and say, we want this model to get really good at detecting seizure frequency. It wasn't originally made to do this, but we can fine tune it to do that using this method called Clora. We've had some decent results from this, and I think a lot of research is going down this avenue, using small models and fine tuning them. So, how do we fine tune this and how do we collect our data? So I think everyone's used to maybe going onto ChatGPT and asking it a question such as, describe this document in full to me, or explain what this concept is. And you typically ask a question like this: so can you extract all mentions of prescriptions or seizure frequency in this clinic letter? So you put that in as a question, and the answer you want, at least for us, because we want to extract structured data from unstructured clinic letters, it looks a bit like this. So this is a JSON file. This is structured data. We don't just want an algorithm to say, thank you very much for your question. I've spotted seizure frequency at line 7 of this document. That's not good enough for us. We need structured data. JSON is a universal data format. So the answer we want is something like this. We spend a lot of our time fine-tuning this question to give us structured data like this. And as some of you may have heard, these algorithms, they tend to hallucinate. They will see things which aren't actually in the data. And we spend a lot of time sort of developing ways to correct this JSON document which comes out. So take our question. This is our answer that we would like. So an MSc student recently who tried to fine tune, I think it was Llama 2, to detect seizure frequency. And they went through various steps to do this. We rented some GPU to do this for, I think it was 30 hours over a month, and we got some decent results. So using Llama 2 and our own data that we've collected over time, we were able to get some decent precision and recall for detecting seizure frequency. So, we think as a group that using these smaller LLMs, this is a good direction to travel for NLP research. We spend a lot of time doing that kind of thing now. By the way, if you want to benchmark and you play about with LLMs and you want to benchmark against our own data, we have published our data sets to do this. So we've published 200 synthetic letters on Zenodo. They're in JSON format, and you can fine tune your own models to this if you want to try your own. So we moved on. So we help out other colleagues in other research areas. So we've recently worked with these guys in skin cancer, so Ian Whitaker's group, leveraging things like LLMs in cancer research. So can you use LLMs to pick out things like basal cell carcinoma? And can that help in MDT settings? So does it speed up the process from extracting information from patient notes and bring them to an MDT setting to discuss that patient there? And then we've also used this in these kinds of things in improving surveillance of emergency department activities. So we want to know, why do people end up in an A&E department on a Saturday night, that kind of thing. So you can trawl through the notes, and you can use any NLP algorithm or LLMs to do this kind of thing. So we've done this work with Ronan's group, Ronan Lyon's group recently. I just want to say lastly that our current project that we're working on, which is going to, all of this sort of 6, 7, 8 years of worth of research and direction of travel has gone into. We're working with a collaboration with King's College London. We're interested in trying to predict drug-resistant epilepsy in a population. So around 50% of people who have epilepsy, they find that after a while the drugs just don't work for them and they can't control their seizures. We'd like to be able to understand why that is, and can we predict in advance who will become drug resistant. So we're going to use LLM to try and extract as much information as we can from patients and combine that with the SAIL data bank and run various models in there to try and predict that. So it's a nice project that we're working on for the next 2 years, and we're hoping to get some really good results from that. So thanks very much for listening to me today. This is the team, the Barmy Army, that have worked on this sort of research for a while, and happy to answer any questions.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks a lot. Just while I'm going to grab the first question and then see if people have any other questions. My first question is, the benefit of this would be to be able to sort of code letters and then maybe bring them into SAIL or things like that. How easy is it for people who don't do natural language processing to be given this, for example, in a hospital practice or at a service provider, where they could run it and code things and extract it? Because getting access to the letters is the first problem, really.
Yeah. So it depends what you want to do with large language models these days, because you could have a model, get IT to set up a system like they have in SAIL, where you have a large language model and it can see all the clinic letters in your department, so a clinician has access to this. And you can well imagine a clinician just going in and asking a question as they would: can you bring me all patients, say all women of childbearing age that are still on sodium valproate? And I think an algorithm like ChatGPT would stand a decent chance of doing that kind of thing. But we're interested in a very specific task. Can we get structured outputs from unstructured data like clinic letters and link them up with something like SAIL? That's definitely more difficult. There's a barrier of entry to that. We do have clinicians. So Steve Alley, who I mentioned on the last slide, he's a cancer surgeon, and he's coding these things himself now. It does require some knowledge with Python to do this kind of thing, but there is definitely a barrier to this. I think it's easier now to work with LLMs than it is with training from scratch, neural networks. That's quite difficult. But the fact we have clinicians that are training their own algorithms and fine-tuning their own models, I think it suggests that there is scope to do that. And we'd be more than happy to speak to anyone that is interested in that kind of thing.
Brilliant. Does anybody have any questions, any thoughts or comments at all? I think so. Arron, will you? Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, was there a question there?
Sorry, I was just turning on my camera and microphone. I think it's for Sinead's question, Arron. It seems to me that the process of learning that you went through to develop the system is really important here. And how to develop a library and how to develop the network. And you've touched on this a little bit there with an example. So will it continue to be important to have a high level of expertise in the clinical scenario? And if so, how do you foresee matching that up with the coding expertise? How can you help people forward?
Yeah, I think the main pitfall, if you don't understand how LLMs work, a good example is hallucination. So LLMs will infer something that isn't in the clinic letter at all. And so having a basic understanding of what LLMs do and what they're likely to fall down on, I think that's essential for clinicians to know about. Everyone's using Copilot now, I hear, in the university, so it comes with a Microsoft license and so on. And I do think that there are people that are using these and just trusting the output of these large language models. But if you understood how they're trained, there could be some education around that and the common pitfalls. I do think that's really important as end users. When it comes to coding, so in my opinion, working with large language models and Python libraries to do this, it is easier than it has been. We're talking maybe 5 lines of code to spin up a large language model and ask it questions and feed in some of your own data. I think you can get quite far with that, and that can entice some clinicians maybe. So again, we've worked with Steve and so on to do that kind of thing. But there's still a barrier of entry to this. And, I will obviously advocate for data scientists and their role in this kind of thing. And, it's team science approach. So there's to fine tune a model. And, I talk about that JSON file. It seems like a very insignificant problem. But if you just miss a curly brace off that JSON file, suddenly that JSON file becomes invalid. It can't be read into other libraries. So you do a lot of work figuring out problems you wouldn't necessarily have done in previous time. So there's still a place for coding, as you say, and that kind of thing.
Thank you. That's helpful.
So Arron, would you stay around to the end in case people have any other questions to ask you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. So now I'd like to introduce Libby, who's going to talk to us about the new cardiac network in Wales. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. So hopefully my slide should now be up. Yeah, so I'm Libby Ellins and I'm based at Swansea University, but today I'm talking to you about the National Cardiovascular Research Network. And that recently received sustainability funding from Health and Care Research Wales and the British Heart Foundation. And we are a little bit different from some of the other centres that receive sustainability funding in that we've actually only been going quite a short period of time. So we're still in the process of scaling up. Wait, my slides change. So who are we? As I mentioned, we're funded by HCRW and BHF, plus contributions from the universities. We're led by Professor Chris George from Swansea University and Prof Barry McDonnell from Cardiff Metropolitan University. And our leadership team comprises members from a number of universities based within Wales. But really importantly, we also have members of patient representatives on our leadership team and a person who's got expertise in cardiovascular policy. We've also, and some of you might be these, got a group of people who are called our NCRN champions. And these are people who are interested and take part in research in cardiovascular disease throughout Wales in a variety of areas. And they're basically, as it says, to champions of cardiovascular disease research throughout Wales. And then finally, we've got our critical friends of the external advisory group. So the vision for the NCRN really is to be catalysing sort of high quality research through connections of people and ideas across Wales and also globally. And we want to understand why and how cardiovascular disease occurs, with the outcome of improving prevention and better diagnostics and therapies for patients in Wales and beyond. So we want to do this through building sort of collaborations within the NCRN, and this is from a number of different areas. So we've got multidisciplinary expertise, so the different areas of academic expertise and bringing those together. We've also got the knowledge within the clinicians and the healthcare providers who are dealing with the patients. And we've got global partners and sharing sort of the expertise that's been developed sort of throughout the world. But really importantly as well, we want to be there working with the patient and the public to be able to help co-design sort of research and identify the priorities sort of so that the research that's done has a meaningful impact. So the structure of the NCRN I briefly alluded to sort of earlier, but through the funding that we've received, this has given us some more support staff and people to help with developing the research across Wales. So we've got 2 project managers and bid development officers, and they're going to be really key for helping us develop sort of more linked research projects and improve our grant applications and just help with that extra work to help bring people together. Obviously, with these centres, we get a lot of administrative burden, so we are getting some administrators to help us with that. But also importantly, we're going to have a communications and engagement officer. They'll be based at Cardiff Met, but they're there to promote the research throughout Wales and sort of help develop engagement between the different sort of universities, health boards, etc. We have some fellowships that I'll touch on in a moment, and as you can see along the bottom, we've got some funding opportunities. So the funding is divided into a number of sort of small pots, really. So if we start with the Aurora Fund, that's there to sort of facilitate wide-ranging community-based sort of outreach and public engagement. And we really want to sort of try and boost engagement from those typically excluded from research. And so we're going to work with people who are already experts in this area to help bring those underserved communities into the sort of cardiovascular network. We've got that Research Responsive Fund, and that's to help provide flexibleness for the development of sort of competitive grants and respond to sort of opportunities that come up. And as I mentioned, we've got the fellowships, and these will be 2 based at Swansea University and 2 based at Cardiff Metropolitan University. And these will be within the themes of the network to help boost the research capacity in these priority areas. And there is also a Data Access Catalytic Fund, which I'll talk about in a little while. So as I said, we've got we want to boost our sort of capability within our themes, and the key themes of the network are in 2 main areas. So these are the strengths of research that are currently going on across Wales at the moment, and we really want to build on those areas. So as you can see, we've got 2 themes that are quite broad. We've got tackling arrhythmias and myocardial disease, and then we've got vascular ageing and clinical outcome. And we also want to make sure that we're using the other sort of rich point for Wales, which is the use of big data through the SAIL data bank and our electronic health records. So cutting up underneath both of those themes is our data and advanced analytics theme. Now, I am a co-lead of that theme alongside my colleague, Dr. Renan Toms, who's based at Cardiff Metropolitan. And at the moment, we're still sort of developing our aims and objectives, but we're keen to develop sort of data capability across the network, really keen to enhance the use of cardiovascular data sets to bring, and that involves bringing in new cardiovascular related data sets to sale, for example, such as imaging data, that might be sort of echo or MRI data, for example, and some work is already going on externally to that, which we're sort of involved with. And sort of we basically want to increase the knowledge of what we've already got, but sort of be able to better link with, obviously, the SAIL, but there's the British Heart Foundation Data Science Centre and other sort of data sources and institutes that we can link with and try and improve knowledge for both those who've never done this type of research before, but also those a bit more experienced. And on that point, we'd really like to hear from people who wish to be involved with cardiovascular disease research or are already involved, and what support they might need, and areas that they've struggled or areas that are really good, so that we can highlight and sort of send people to that sort of information. Also, one key thing through our funding is that we will have a data analyst. They are to be appointed as soon as we get through the administration of the university. But they're based at Swansea University in population data science. We've got funding, definitely for 2.5 years, but there's potential funding for up to 5 years. And this is going to be quite a key role for us, and it will be quite a varied role, I think, but it's to be leading data integration and development, supporting advanced analytics and research, but also helping to collaborate on research, design and data use, and strengthening data science capacity and funding. But they're there to basically really help to support the beginning of research projects within sort of data science within Wales. And I previously listed this data access catalyst funding, and this is also a small pot of money that's there to sort of facilitate access to both population and cohort derived data. It's there to try and help overcome some of those sort of initial financial barriers that can be there, and help with the acquisition of sort of preliminary data. So it may be that you've got some data that you might want to link with SAIL, and we might be able to help facilitate and look at how much linkage there might be with that through this sort of funding. And that would then enhance your ability to actually apply for a grant in the future. Now, this will be a co-funding model. So it might be that you will need some match funding, and that might be, say, CCORN funding from a university to help support that. Now, you might have seen under the title that we are advanced data analytics as well. And this is a focus of my colleague, Dr. Nicole Sullo. This is what she's really going to be leading on. And so this is just a sort of brief slide sort of introducing that, but she will at a later date provide sort of more information around that topic. And so that really covers the key points, and we're still sort of setting up all our structures and where we're going. But if you do have any sort of questions for us, please don't hesitate to drop me an email or drop the NCRN an email. And we do have a website at the moment that's just been set up. So events and information about sort of our funding pots and things like that will come up on there, and other opportunities. And we will at some point, I believe, be on LinkedIn. So we aren't on Twitter or X. But yes, if you do have any questions, please do let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or any thoughts at all? I'd like to ask Libby. Can I ask about the BHF Data Science Centre based in Scotland, and how much you would collaborate or overlap or work with that centre?
Well, we haven't had any contact as of yet, but we would always be keen to have those conversations and to see. I mean, we certainly don't want to be trying to replicate what's already been done. We want to be able to sort of work together with others to actually improve. So if there's areas of similarity, great.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions or comments at all? Emma, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a question for Arron, because I'm completely not in his area at all. If we've got an idea for a cardiovascular project that we think the methods you've used would be helpful for, how do we make that first approach to say, do we have to do scoping and an approach through sale like we do for other projects, or do we need to take a different approach? Because I need to find somebody who knows about it to start working up the idea, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, so the whole NLP work we do is kind of separate from sale. We would use a data set derived via NLP just as a standard data set we would put into sale. So you can put your own data into sale as long as it's you can link it via an NHS number and the Welsh, then you can link those in. So if you were interested, you know, I'd be happy to chat about it, because we could work through the problem, what you want to get out of your data store, and then form a data set, and then you can say to sale, look, we've got our own data set, we want to put this into sale, and they'll go through the scoping process with you then.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Emma, you're bringing the images in that Libby was talking about.
Not quite. So the first stage is we're bringing in all of the echo measurements that go back to 2017 from the local health board. So that it's a CSV file, but that in itself is 800 megabytes, I think. It's a lot of data, and we're trying to work out if it improves the way that sale counts ultrasound heart scans, and if it allows us to look at the subtype of heart failure and the severity of it, which, as Arron has neatly shown with his epilepsy work, that's not in the READ codes or the ICD codes. And that's data that's missing, that would be really helpful for research. We can get some of that from the echo measurement, so we're going to try that, but every ultrasound scan, every echo has a written report. And we also have the cardiologist's clinic letter. And so it may be that offers us an alternative model that might be better than the echo measurements. We're not sure. But the work is around better understanding of heart failure development and management.
Would you say that with the reports and that, you might not need the images if you can text mine the reports, or the reports not the level you'd want that if you brought in images?
I think there's room for both. So I think the measurements will give us a lot of very, very useful information that improves on what we get from sale now, but we can only see in the reports the interpretation of the person who's looked at the images now. And of course, we don't know what they're missing when they look at the images. So it may be that looking through the images and the raw DICOM data, that we're better able, if we don't have humans doing it, we may be that we're able to pick up patterns in the imaging data that aren't evident to us from what we know now. So I think we will move to images, but I think a better first step initially is to bring the measurement data in, or the information from reports and letters. The ultrasound scans are enormous, though. Yeah, absolutely enormous, and obviously there are a lot of them. So.
So does anybody have any thoughts or questions for Libby or Arron before we find? So next month's one is going to be looking at bringing together geography data, so and health data. So looking at, for example, pollution data, or looking at built environment, but bringing together geography and health in data science. And so thanks a lot, both of you, for being willing to present what you're, the up and coming, what we can get involved in. So thank you so much. And thanks, Arron, for being willing, if people want to talk and ask you a bit more, to get in touch, and you too, Libby. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Sinead.
See you next month, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.